What is up, everyone? Welcome to the F6P NFL DFS Kickoff Show. Just two dudes talking DFS. Last time this year, Joe, for 2023, that we will get to, talk about this stuff. But again, part of Fantasy Six Packs, amazing DFS contributors. We got me and Joe's show. Tomorrow you'll have Chris and Dave Eddy for the DFS Den. Me and Joe talk about our favorite plays, 69 or 100 or below on DraftKings. But let's start off, Joe, with, are you feeling better? I know you had an unfortunate Christmas catching the Rona.
Yeah, regrettably, literally like the day I go on vacation, I start to feel sick as I'm finishing my grading. And then the next day I test positive. And so I've been quarantining this entire time, which the upside is, I've had some time to catch up on some movies and TV shows, but otherwise not my favorite way to spend vacation.
Getting your me time in, but feeling a little lonely, right, Joe, especially around the holidays?
Exactly. Because, you're supposed to hang out with family for Christmas and then supposed to hang out with people for New Year's, which fingers crossed can still happen. But yeah, not my favorite time, but hey, we've got plenty of sports to keep me company. I've got my Wildcats tonight against Oklahoma and a reasonable slate of football this weekend, although one game we won't talk about is one of the better ones, which is Lions-Cowboys on Saturday.
So. Or, honestly, very big game tonight for the Browns. But before we get into these plays, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I think that there is more opportunity to build cash game lineups this week than I can remember in a long time, because you can argue there's 3 QBs, 5K or lower, that I really like this week. And obviously you have all kinds of options for stacking them. I think CMC is a must play in cash this week. That'll allow you to get him in. I've actually toyed around with one of the QBs I'm going to talk about and being able to get Kyron Williams, Nico Collins, and CMC with McBride in that lineup because I stacked this QB with his number one receiver. So just a lot of opportunities. And be sure to obviously pay attention to the wire. Amari Cooper was a late scratch tonight. Very interested to see what happens with Brandon Jacobs and Zamir White for the Raiders. So just pay attention to that thing. But let's get right into the QBs, Joe. And I'm going to give this guy, even though I really have got to the point where I think you kind of have to take one of the 3 guys 5K or below, just because of the flexibility it gives. But I do really like Kyler Murray. I know he's got a questionable tag. If he plays, though, 6,300, this Philly defense, it's kind of shocking. They are not good. Their secondary continues to get beat. And then Murray, I just love his upside. At least 20 rushing yards in every game this season, 30 or more in 4 of his last 6. Thrown a touchdown in 5 straight. Jay says the brain's back. What's up, Jay? And I just love it because you can stack him with McBride, who is a number 1 wide receiver at this point, one of the best options in football. And you can do that for what? 12,200. That's a pretty good start to your lineup. Again, I think I'm going to end up going lower because it's just such a weird week, but you got all these kind of other QBs starting, but I do like Murray.
Yeah, I play. I just think this Eagles defense, like you said, not even close to where they were last year. They lost a lot of guys in the back 7 to free agency, and then within the season, they've lost a lot of guys in the back 7 to injuries. So there's really a lot that you can attack there. And even with a banged up wide receiver core, hopefully most of those guys will be able to play. Like you said, the main guy you're looking for anyway is Trey McBride. So I like that combination. Also, they've been, I believe, pretty giving in the quarterback.
Oh yeah, they're off
category.
Yep, and they're bad versus all the more reason to
like Kyler. Yeah. But I'm going to go a little bit more expensive here. And Matthew Stafford against my New York Giants. Stafford on the year, you look at the year-long numbers, and you go, he's been fine, right? He's 18 points per game. That's right in there with Lawrence and Murray, who he's sandwiched between on the DK lineup. But then you go last 5 weeks, and a little bit of a different story. 22 plus in 4 of the 5. His off game was an 18.5 point showing against Washington, 14 touchdowns to 1 interception over this last month. And it's not just him beating up on bad defenses like Washington. He played the Ravens and Browns in this stretch. Back-to-back weeks, he played those teams. 22.9, 23.6 was the 2 best defenses in the NFL. 6 touchdowns, no picks. So the fact that he's playing against those defenses and doing that well makes you feel good about a Giants defense that's been very on and off. Yes, they can force turnovers sometimes. They got a pick 6 last week, which kept them in that Eagles game. But also very shaky. If you watch the Saints, hopefully you didn't have to watch this game unless you're a Giants or a Saints fan. But if you watched that game 2 weeks ago, Carr is carving up the defense because he can make quick decisions. And as long as you can make quick decisions against the Martindale defense, you can do well. It's why Joe Burrow always destroyed him on the Ravens. Matthew Stafford in a Sean McVay offense can make very quick decisions. The only real worry in this game would be that Stafford and the Rams have been better against zone defenses than man defenses on the season. But the last team they played, the aforementioned New Orleans Saints, like the Giants, top 5 at running man defense on the season. 328 yards and 2 touchdowns for Stafford in that game. He is firing on all cylinders. So, yeah, obviously, like we're about to talk about the guys who are under 5,000 who provide, as you said, huge opportunities at other positions. So if you want to save $2,000, you're going to be able to instead of going with Stafford. But I just think, you're looking at that floor of 18.5 that he had against Washington 2 weeks ago. I think that's the floor, and the ceiling is we're getting 25 plus. So I don't think you're going to – I don't know if there's a guy with a lower floor this week outside of, your Josh Allens, your Jalen Hurts, who are another $1,600. So
I like Stroud a lot this week for what it's worth too. He's been unreal at home.
That's true. And again, the Titans defense, not great against the pass. So
it's worse than you think. I went and looked at all their QBs they played, Joe. It's very similar to the Falcons. Like they've played maybe 4 above average QBs, and they're 12th in points allowed on DK. You can get at them. I really do. I love Stroud and Collins, who obviously we can't talk about because they're over 7K, but those guys are unreal at home. Look at their road home splits. The value, you could have gone with Jared Stidham, 4,800. I mean, you look at it, great matchup. Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos, they paid him more than you do a normal backup. He played well last year. You could talk me into Mason Rudolph at 5K with Seattle. Another team struggles versus the pass. Cincy's a good defense, and he carved them up. But I got to go with the cheapest guy, and it's Tyrod Taylor, 4,600. Versus the Rams. He scored 10 points and 1/2 versus the Eagles last week. He's had a 20-point game earlier this year versus Washington. But what this is all about is it's kind of twofold. The biggest is, to your point, I love the Rams. Take your pick at wide receiver. The Stafford play I love. Kieran Williams, I think, is going to have a monster day. That means the Giants are going to be throwing a lot. And the other good thing is the Rams have really struggled with running QBs, and I don't know if enough has been made about it. You look back, week 4, they played Anthony Richardson. He had 50 yards and a rushing touchdown. Played Jalen Hurts 2 weeks later, 70 yards and a touchdown. Joshua Dobbs, 47 rushing yards against this team. Lamar Jackson, 70 yards versus this team. And Taylor is somebody who can run. Like he's ran for 20 yards or more in his last 4 games that he's played in, not just started, just the last 4 games. He got 20 yards in 1/2 last week at 4,600 for cash. We're talking about 15 points and you're happy. And I think there's a great chance he could have 20 plus. Plus there's a wide receiver who helped me win a lot of money Monday that I love pairing with him in this matchup. And I had to go with Taylor as the official pick. But I like all 3 of those because they have great matchups. And again, in cash, you're looking for 3-4 times that, and you can really do whatever you want with your lineup if you have a QB 5K or less.
Yeah, I'm unsurprisingly with you on this. Like you said, I do think there's reasons to like any of these guys. No, none of these defenses that they're facing are ones that scare you off, which would be the one worry. Obviously, I don't want to take a quarterback who's 4,800 if they're playing against the Ravens, the Browns, the Jets, because I'm probably not going to get a lot out of it. Now, against the Chargers, the Rams, and the Broncos, vastly different story. Plus, a lot of these guys, you can spend very little on potentially their top receivers in these games. But yeah, to me, Tyrod is the choice. I mean, first of all, he's the cheapest at 4,600 because they weren't thinking he was going to be the starter. Like you said, the rushing that we've seen, again, that Jets game, he gets hurt in the second quarter. He had 33 rushing yards. Last week, he plays the one half, like you said, over 20 rushing yards. So the fact that we can just check that box, we're getting 20 plus rushing yards. The 2 games he fully started, 200 yards passing at least in both of those. Obviously 10 points in that Buffalo game isn't great. That was Buffalo's defense when it was healthier than it is now, and they've actually kind of come back around this season. But yeah, it's a much better defense than he's playing against the Rams. Also, famously, the Giants got the ball down to the 1 yard line to end both those halves and did not score points. So very easily, he could have run one of those in. He could have completed a pass on one of those. He gives us like a 15-point game there, over 20 against Washington, and he only threw 29 passes in the Washington game. Like you said, I think he's going to have to drop back 35 plus times in this game. Obviously, I'm sure the game plan will be try to dose in a heavy amount of Saquon, keep the Rams off the field. How successful they'll be, I'm not sure. And whenever the Rams are on the field, like I said with Stafford, I think they're going to carve up this Giants defense. So, yeah, if it's Tyrod in a game where he's got to pass, he's good enough to take advantage of that. I mean, just had a 75-yard touchdown pass last week to Slayton. So he opens that up in this offense more than DeVito only had that against Washington, which, again, is the worst defense in the NFL. Daniel Jones, whether his own limitations and Andrew Thomas being hurt, he had no ability to put the ball downfield this year. Tyrod does have that. That makes me even more in love with him at $4,600.
Yeah, I think it's the play. Again, you could talk me into the other 3, though. All right, the backs this week. It's really simple. It's volume is king. What's up, Dave Eddy? Chuba Hubbard at 5,800. I mean, the volume this guy is getting right now on a regular basis at Jacksonville is just absurd. 86 rush attempts in his last 4, at least 18 in each one of them. I think I read somewhere that he is coming into this last week the only running back all season with 22 or more rush attempts in 3 straight games. And again, in the game after that, he had 18. So they are feeding him the rock. He's had double-digit points on DK in 5 straight, touchdown in 3 of his last 5. And this Jags run defense, it's good, but they give up touchdowns. They've given up 6 rushing touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. And there has been a few games here recently, looking at the Baltimore Ravens one, where they gave up 250, and most of that was not Lamar. So I love Hubbard. And I think what's going to be a competitive game, which that's what's most important for Hubbard, is that the game stays close. I know he's going to get a ton of carries, good chance he scores, and he's still at a very reasonable price. We're at 5,800. I can build that lineup that I'm talking about where I got all these expensive guys around it.
Yeah, I like that one. This is probably maybe too obvious of a one just because you just look down the list and you go, oh, this is a good
There's
spot.
nothing wrong with obvious, Joe.
But yeah, if you're playing cash, obvious is fine. It's DeAndre Swift, 6,500 against the Arizona Cardinals. Swift had a really great run earlier in the season, weeks 2 through 12, when the Eagles were on a roll. They go 9-1 during that stretch. He touches the ball at least 15 times in all 10 of those games. Minimum of 9.4 points, so he's never given us the little freezing cold symbol. And he topped 16 points in 6 of those 10 games. So you have a relatively high ceiling or relatively high floor with a reasonable ceiling. Kind of, fell to a stop as soon as the games got away from them. They went away from the run because they were getting smoked by Dallas. He only has 11 carries in that game. smoked by San Francisco. He only had 8 total touches in that game. Seattle game, they blow that one at the end, but that's kind of the beginning of the return to form. He has 18 carries, 74 yards. Last week against the Giants, 20 carries, 92 yards. He gets a score, 15.2 points. There's no reason to think that this Cardinals game is not one that the Eagles are, if not in control as they should be, because they've been kind of shaky lately. They're not going to be out of this game. I shouldn't say no chance, because that's when you get burned in the NFL. But fuck it. No chance the Cardinals smoke the Eagles in this game. And this Cardinals defense, again, 32nd against running backs.
How many teams are there, Joe?
There are 32.
That's not good then.
And yeah, it's pretty much an across the metrics type of thing. FTN, fantasies, adjusted line yards. So that's, again, trying to remove some of the larger runs and just focus on what's happening near the line of scrimmage. Cardinals are dead last against the run. DVOA against the run, 31st. PFF's offensive line versus defensive line advantage in the run game this week. Biggest advantage on the slate, Philadelphia Eagles. So across the board, this is a good matchup for Swift and the Eagles offensive line. I don't see a reason to think that the Cardinals are going to, pull what they did against Dallas and pull off a huge upset. In part because that game was in Arizona. This game's in Philadelphia. I think the Eagles roll this game and Swift gets us at least close to 20 points, if not over.
Yeah, it's just been one of those weird years. We had concerns, though, kind of about his usage, and I wonder if that played a little bit of a role in it, too. And now that they had all those blowouts, I'm sure he didn't get a lot of work in those games. So
no,
maybe he's feeling a little bit more spry here. But all right, my value is, I know a lot of people are worried he's not going to, get his role that he has the last 2 weeks. I do not believe that Josh Jacobs is going to play. I don't. I know he's been a non-participant, I think, for like the last 2 practices, whatever that means, because you don't actually do anything. But they're giving you technically, yes, he was a non-participant, but he was at practice. It's like, okay. But White has earned a role either way. And I don't understand for the Raiders, what is the benefit of not giving White more of a look? Kind of see it. Can this guy be our featured back? Because we've seen 2 games. It's been really good. Now, if he can make it a whole month and say, do the last 2 games, you kind of know, okay, this guy is a piece that we know we have moving forward. With Adams, you got a young QB. And it's just a smash play if Jacobs doesn't play. Like if Jacobs is out, he's in every lineup. If Jacobs plays, I'm still going to probably use him, to be honest, because, he scored 17.5 points on DK back-to-back, 214 yards on 39 carries. That's almost 5.5 yards per. And that's a good Kansas City defense that he really did gash and kind of control that game. And the Colts are garbage versus running backs. They're 30th this year. If you need a reminder, the Falcons, all of the guys, everybody, Patterson, Algier, Beach, they all got a little room to run because they were playing the Colts. Again, I love Zamir White if, Jacobs is out, but I think I'm still talking myself into using him for cash because he's 5,100, even if Jacobs does play, because I'd be shocked if he went back to getting those 3-4 carries a game and that's it.
Yeah, I think you're right across the board. Like you said, if Jacobs doesn't go, Zamir White should be in all of your lineups. There's no reason not to be. It's a plus app matchup. They just won a game too where they didn't complete a pass, I believe, the last 3 quarters of the game.
Yep.
So they're leaning on the run. That's what this team wants to do. They want to attack you defensively and then attack you in the run game and prevent Aiden O'Connell from losing the game. That's what they want to do. Power to them. Antonio Pierce seems like he just got himself a job, in part because Zamir White's getting it done.
If he doesn't, what the fuck? For real, he's earned it.
Right.
What more do you want?
Well,
they were garbage.
Plus, I believe they're still paying 2 coaches. So I'm guessing they're probably just going to be like, fuck it, we can save some money too and give everyone what they want. Antonio Pierce, here's the job. So, yeah, Zamir White's the play if Josh Jacobs does not play. If Jacobs does, one of the guys I'm going to be looking at is Devin Singletary. You mentioned volume is king. This is a guy who, in the last 8 weeks, he has 3 top 8 finishes in fantasy. Those are the 3 games where he got 20-plus carries, scored at least 22 points on DK in all 3 of them, broke 100 yards in all 3 of those games. One of those games, he didn't even score a touchdown, which was against Tennessee, who he's matched up again this week.
It's a good thing that James Cook's worked out, because if not, could you imagine being Buffalo, who never, ever gave Singletary this kind of room where they just gave him the ball, and now the Texans do, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe this dude is an every down back.
It's wild too, because who was the guy that they were always going back and forth with Singletary with? It was Zach
Moss, who is also, that's a great point.
Who also had an incredible
it's
early
like, what's going on in
season
Buffalo
with the Colts. So yeah, I don't know if the scheming was bad, the offensive line wasn't getting it done. I'm not sure what it was, because seemingly all of these backs are actually at least reasonable. But yeah, Singletary against the same Tennessee defense he's going to face 2 weeks ago, 26 carries for 121, 4 receptions for 49. So 170 total yards, scored 24 points without scoring a touchdown. Now, obviously, you could argue less likely to run the ball 26 times because Stroud's back. But keep in mind,
20-point games recently.
But yeah, keep in mind the other 2. Wait, what's up?
He's had 2 20-point games with Stroud in the last,
right, that's what I was going to say, is that, like, the Tennessee game shouldn't be viewed as a total fluke, because, the previous 2 games where he goes off are with Stroud. And I'd argue it's easier to do stuff with Stroud because, a lot fewer stacked boxes against you. And again, Tennessee, although they've kind of shown some cracks here and there in the run game compared to the last few seasons, there's been 5 different games where opposing running back combos have broken 100 yards, including weeks 14 and 15, which again, that's Singletary, and the week before, unsurprisingly, the Dolphins were able to do it as well. Not a great defense overall, usually pretty good against the run, but the fact that they're going to have to respect the pass with Stroud back, again, Nico Collins, if he was below 7,000, is probably one of our plays this week.
Oh, he definitely
Dalton Schultz is also a very reasonable play this week. I just generally like this Texans offense. And if I like the offense, I'm going to like the back, who in a game where I think they're going to be winning most of the game has a good chance to get 20-plus carries, 100-plus yards. So Singletary remains a very strong play. As long as he's under the 6,000 range, especially with Stroud back, I love Singletary.
Yeah, I think that's a really good play. Another thing that we didn't really mention, but I do think it's important to have players on teams that their games matter. It's just less likely they're shenanigans, right? Like where
it's harder to predict.
Yeah. Exactly. Like, because they need a win. So their guys are going to go to where in some of these teams that are eliminated or tanking, or it gets scary. And again, on top of that, it's an a don't, which, I love that because you don't have to worry about weather or anything.
Yeah,
but
always.
Moving on to the wide receiver, I think the wide receiver position this week is a lot about either the expensive guys are going way down, because I think there's a lot of good plays, 5K and below. But I just had to mention for my median, George Pickens, 5,300 at Seattle, go Dogs. I mean, to look at what was kind of going on heading into that game, I mean, it felt like Pickens' time in Pittsburgh was in jeopardy. Maybe his career was in jeopardy, right? Like, people were being so harsh. And what did he do? He just went out, and again, a pretty good Cincinnati Bengals defense, 4 catches, 195 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I've been a big Pickens guy since the day he came into the league, and I feel like that Kenny Pickett has really held him back. He cannot throw the ball down the field. Rudolph can. Like, he always has been able to throw the ball down the field, and it's been evident that Pickens has had 3 games over 100 air yards. He had 1 game with Pickett, and then the last 2, both without. I think there's a really good chance they're going to continue to air it out. And this offense has been much better since they got rid of Matt Canada. I know, shocker. Can't believe that's the case. But they have. And this is a Seattle team that has given up a lot of big pass plays. Pickens is the ultimate guy. And if he's going to get 6 to 7 targets, and I know 2 or 3 of them are going to be 20, 30 yards down the field, like last week, which ended up in both of those touchdowns, at 5,300, I feel like it's a smash play.
Yeah, that's a compelling case for sure. And one day, I'm not a particularly a Steelers fan, but from a fantasy standpoint, hopefully one day we will see reasonable QB play return to Pittsburgh so that the Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth offense,
Calvin Austin, who I keep telling people, if he was on a good team with a good QB, I think he's really special. It would, do some really tough stuff to stop. And again, they don't really have anybody. I do, though, believe in Rudolph. If you look at his numbers in the games that he started, he's had one really bad start. He's thrown for 225 or more every other game. Everybody remembers the Browns game. He threw 4 picks. Garrett hit him with his own helmet, right? But other than that, he's been pretty consistently good. And this Seattle pass defense is much weaker than the Cincinnati one he faced last week.
Yeah, the Cincinnati defense, you also never know what you're going to get with them just because
that's fair.
Lou Lamoriello is just I mean that positively too.
Yeah, no, I know.
Because he's just, creative defensive coordinator who will switch things up on you.
And if he gets the right
where Seattle, the one thing you can always trust, whether that defense is good or bad or anywhere in between, you have a general idea of what you will see with Seattle. They're schematically not a lot of change there. I will go much higher with my mid-tier, and that is Chris Olave, 6,800 against Tampa Bay. Outside of the week he missed because of injury, Olave has been on a heater. Since week 9, he has been 12-plus points in every single game. 4 of the last 5, he's hit at least 19.9. Consistently seeing 8 or 9 targets. Last week it was up to 13 because, no big surprise, the Rams were lighting up another team. So the Saints had to pass more. He ends up with 9 of 13 for $123, a 26-point game without a touchdown. So it hasn't mattered. When he scores, it's great. When he doesn't, we're still getting 15-plus points because that's what's going on with Olave right now. He is officially listed as questionable, but again, he played last week. He has logged limited practices so far. So I don't see reason to really be doubting that he will play. Plus, this is season on the line. Like you said, we want the teams where we know these guys need to be playing the best players as much as possible. They lose to Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay may clinch the division depending on, I believe, what happens with your Falcons. But yeah, this is it. And again, Tampa Bay's defense has been banged up in the secondary all season against number 1 wide receivers per FTN fantasy. They are 27th in DVOA, 29th in yards given up to number 1 wide receivers this season at 87.
And how many teams are there in the NFL, Joe? 32?
There are 32.
That's not good.
So, and just so people know, the other teams behind them are the Chargers.
Washington.
So again, that's a reason to potentially throw in the Denver guys this week, even with all the backup quarterbacks.
Especially if Sutton's out, right? Judy becomes the number 1. He's like 5,100 or 5,500, something like that.
Right. You can do super cheap combos. Not one of my official plays this week, but a guy I like a lot. DeAndre Hopkins. Houston is 31st in yards given up to number 1 wide receivers. Wow. And of course, Washington is last by 17 yards because they are the absolute worst. So obviously always play people against Washington. But yeah, the overall point though, Olave has been on a roll. There is no reason to think that changes against Tampa Bay, especially if Baker Mayfield continues to play as well as he has and forces Tampa Bay or forces the Saints into a more pass heavy game script.
Which is what happened in the first game as the Bucs smoked the Saints. So a lot to say in that. I also believe that something we talked about earlier this year was Carr's shoulder got banged up. He just stopped throwing it down the field at all. It really hurt
I know.
Olave's,
ruined it for me.
Fantasy production.
All my predictions about Olave.
But if you look, in the last like 5-6 weeks and the air yards, all that stuff's back on the way up, which makes me think Carr is more healthy, and Olave, as we've said at the beginning of the year, is one of the best receivers in football. So,
and again, in the game he missed, that was against the Giants, Carr was also very much on his game. So I think that's even more to your point.
Well, as much as Carr can be.
Yeah, I mean, there's still limitations,
right?
But yeah, we feel good about Olave with this version, even with this version of Carr.
No, I really like that. The value, I owe a huge gratitude to your New York Giant, Darius Slayton. Him and Zamir White on the Monday slate helped me have a very profitable day. So I appreciate both of them. And honestly, Slayton has been a guy that I use in DFS now for 2-3 years, thanks to you, because you watch Giants games. And I know this is a guy,
sadly,
he's going to have stinkers, like he is, but he is one of the legit deep threats in the NFL that if he has 3-4 catches, there's a good chance he's going to have 60 or more yards and a lot of times a touchdown. He's had 3 double-digit games on DK in his last 5. Big thing for me, he's hit 5.5 times his salary 2 of his last 4. And 2 of those 3, double-digit games came with non-double-digit games, came with Tommy Cutlets at QB, which that's not an issue anymore. I just think the Giants are going to be down. They're going to be throwing. And go back and look at the Ravens game versus the Rams. They give up touchdowns over the top, left and right. That's how Darius Slayton scored last week. And I think there's a very good chance he does that again this week. But the bottom line is he's 3,400. It costs you nothing. And again, you're getting the QB at 46. We're talking $8K. Those guys, to make that lineup good, you're talking about needing, 25 points out of them, probably. That's right at 3 times. And I think there's a great chance they do more. And it just, again, I'm giddy because then I have I have a lineup with CMC, Kyron Williams, McBride, and Collins by doing that QB. And I think there's a chance that both of them could have a really good day because it's a great matchup. I love Darius Slayton this week at 3,400. He is without a doubt the wide receiver you want if you have Tyrod Taylor, and he's dirt cheap.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to talk anybody out of trying to play Slayton this week because, again, going to have to pass. We just saw him connect for a 75-yard touchdown. As they mentioned on the broadcast, a late-round pick who is going to lead the Giants in receiving 4 out of the last 5 years. So Slayton's a productive guy. I love him. Obviously, I hope to eventually have a number 1 receiver who is better than him or Wan'Dale Robinson. But
or somebody better than Tyrod Taylor or Daniel Jones throwing.
Yeah. At pretty much every position that's not running back and left tackle. I would love to have a better player. Well, give or take Waller when he's on the field. But yeah, as long as Slayton is, potential number 1 wide receiver who's under 4,000 in a spot where the team's going to have to pass, he's a very good play. I should probably just make this guy my official play every week, more or less, because that's kind of what it's been. Demario Douglas, 4,300, New England Patriots against the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, I expect the Buffalo Bills to be winning this game pretty handily, most likely. Granted, they just had a weird game where they almost lost to the Chargers.
No. Don't do that. Thursday night. We know Thursday games.
That's true. Thursdays are weird.
I've heard a lot of people hammering it was a Thursday game, people. Calm down. They were on the road.
I will say, though, it was the classic Bills issue of hey, why was that game close? It's they lost the turnover margin by multiple turnovers. It's
I get it. But it was a Thursday game, which that does, it matters. It does.
Barring a slew of Buffalo turnovers without any from the Patriots, the Bills should be up multiple scores the entire second half of this game. The Patriots should have to pass, and the only receiver worth a damn on the Patriots remains Demario Douglas. Since week 8, he has had 7 or more targets in every game he's played except for one. Granted, he did miss a few games in there with injuries, but we're still talking about a 6-game sample size there. Double digits in 4 of the last 5 games. The lone game where that didn't happen was Kansas City, which for all the struggles in Kansas City, that pass defense is actually quite good, especially L'Jarius Sneed. So, and he's a corner who shadows a lot. So if you're the only good receiver on a team, it's pretty tough. Buffalo, Tre'Davious White is already out for the season, as seems to just be the case now, because Buffalo's defense just can't help themselves but get ravaged by injuries. So Demario Douglas will not face an elite corner shadowing him, which means lock him in for 10 to 15 points at a 4,300 price tag. And honestly, he's getting these 10 to 15 points without scoring touchdowns. The last time he actually hasn't scored a touchdown all season. I didn't even realize that. So the guy,
Johnson
four of 5 games, well, his last 5, double-digit points, 0 touchdowns. So he gets a touchdown. We could be talking about a 20-point game for a guy who's 4,300. But again, if he doesn't, I will still be very surprised if he does not give us double-digit points. And that's why pretty much every week I'm locking him in, because he's right in this $4,500 to $4,000 range.
Yeah, I like it. To your point, like, it's safe that he's probably not going to kill you, right? You know you're going to get probably 10 to 12 points, worst case.
We're not getting 2 or 3 points. It's not.
And there is, I mean, you just would have to think, especially with his target rate and stuff, and Zappy's been better. I mean, just being honest at QB,
he has been.
You know, he's probably got a big game coming. At least he better hurry up, though, because he's only got 2 left. But I like that play a lot. Tight end. To me, I know we're going to start with a no doy, but you got to have Trey McBride. You just have to. He's 5,900 at Philly. They're bad against tight ends, but that's not even what it's about. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, that until he reached 6K, I'm just blind putting him in every single week, because think about him as a wide receiver. That's what you need to do. I think sometimes we get so obsessed with the position, and he is somebody who has scored 9 points or more in 6 straight, 20 points or more on DK in 4 of 7, 72 targets in his last 8 games. For those not good at math, if you have a Coweta County education like me, that's 9 targets per game, 5 or more receptions in 6 straight. You're getting a number 1 receiver in an unbelievable matchup. Philadelphia is awful versus tight ends at 5,900. Like, it's just a smash play for me. Him and CMC are the 2 guys for cash. They're going to be in my lineups, and I'll figure it out. But I just think that you can't ask for better matchups, the volume and everything. There's no way I can't play them this week in cash lineups.
No, I'm with you 100%. And, you know, don't get me wrong. I think there's plenty of tight end matchups that you can feel reasonably good about this week.
Not the ceiling, though. Or the floor,
right.
I mean, for that matter.
Right. I mean, that's the whole thing, is like, could Kittle have a bigger game at $300 cheaper? Yeah, he's playing Washington, the worst defense in the NFL. But again, they're the worst defense in the NFL against receivers too. And Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel exist.
Well, and also just remember what Breece Hall did last week, 180 yards with 12 catches, and you got CMC coming in. It's going to be rough. So,
yeah, like he has a 30% target rate on the season.
It's unbelievable.
You know, again, that's number 1 among tight ends. It's ahead of Travis Kelce. I'd rather play him for $1,100 cheaper than I would Travis Kelce, even though the Bengals have been bad against tight ends, just because I also know, again, we've seen Lou Anarumo cause some problems, granted usually with better defenses than he has this season, for this Kansas City offense, which is not firing on all cylinders. So, yeah, to me, McBride is the guy, because, yeah, granted, the Arizona offense isn't incredible either, but this Eagles defense has been getting a bunch of points. And, yeah, he's the number 1 wide receiver on this team. So 100%. As soon as I was just combing through this before I looked at any other stats, I was just looking through DK. I was just like, oh yeah, Trey McBride, because everything you said, he's the number one guy. Pride of CSU. Way to go, Trey.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with Njoku the last few weeks, who I've been smashing in all my lineups too.
Yes.
Like, I know Amari Cooper had that monster game, but even with Njoku still, I think had like 6 receptions, 40 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah.
When you're getting somebody getting 8 to 10 targets a game, and it's this cheap, I mean, 5,900 is crazy. Just go look at the wide receivers in that range, or even just a little bit more expensive. None of them are seeing the volume that he is. The value probably stole this from you, Joe. I apologize, but it's your boy Chig Okonkwo, Tennessee Titans, 3,600 at Houston. He's had 3+ receptions in 5 straight, 26 targets in that span. And he had that stretch, right, where you brought this up when you were playing him over and over again on our Daily Fix show, that he was scoring that 8.5 to 9.9 total week after week. And then finally he had that breakout. Of course, 1 week we don't record the Daily Fix, and so we weren't able to give that play, but that's okay. We're not bitter about it. He had 6 catches for 63 yards, had the touchdown. This is a guy that we thought was going to have a really big year, and it did not work out. But he is starting to look like the guy he was at the end of last season. And then if you listen to this show, you know Houston Texans are definitely a friend of the show. I mean, against tight ends, you can't go wrong. Give up almost 9 targets per, over 6 receptions per game. And at 3,600, we're talking about like 10.34 points, and you're hitting 3 times his salary.
Yeah, that is my favorite play in this lower tier as well. In that middle tier, I think Darren Waller is actually an interesting play again.
Pitts is actually interesting with
Pitts has a really plus matchup. Waller's kind of most consistent back-to-back games were the 2 that Tyrod started. But the one other option I'll really give, though, is just drop down $100. Gerald Everett, again, obvious because Denver's 32nd against tight ends. But Everett, 5 straight games with at least 8 points, 5 straight games with at least 4 receptions, 3 straight games with at least 8 targets. So that's both games that Easton Stick has started. And again, Easton Stick, 37 points over the last 2 weeks, 5,100. You combine him with Everett, that's 8,600. For
QB controversy in Los Angeles. Is that what you're saying, Joe?
That's exactly it. But over the last 2 weeks, that combination, Stick and Everett, that would have, on average, given you 28.5 points.
Wow.
And that, again, that's $8,600.
Not too shabby.
So, like, again, so many options for what you can do. And, obviously the 32nd against tight ends tells a pretty strong story on its own. But only 3 teams have given up more receptions to tight ends than the Broncos. Only the Bengals have given up more yards, and they have given up 2 more touchdowns than anyone else to tight ends this season. So they are truly
I don't even
awful.
think, when was the last time Everett scored? It's been 4 or 5 weeks, so he's been putting up 8 to 11 points without a touchdown, and has the best chance this matchup.
Another guy, who has been productive without giving us the touchdown. So if we get it, 15 to 20 is in play, as I would say it is with Okonkwo, for guys who are $3,600.
All right, Wizzy Jefferson asks, Raiders, Jets, or Rams defense this week? I think I would honestly leave the Jets now that we know Amari Cooper's out. What about you?
I think so too. Part of me is obviously a little worried that it's like this semi Flacco revenge game where he continues his insane streak. But ultimately, that's the best. The Raiders haven't been playing really well recently, so I wouldn't discard them.
I know, but it just scares me that they're huge. I mean, that could be like considered their Super Bowl going into Kansas City on Christmas Day.
Yeah, you're coming off of that, and also just this Jets secondary remains, if not the best secondary, in the top 2 or 3. So,
because I do wonder if the Browns can just flat out run it down somebody's throat. We really haven't seen that since Flacco has become the QB, and that's honestly the best way for them to beat this Jets defense. I don't know if they can do
Yes,
that.
absolutely.
And I just, because of that, I mean, the Rams is intriguing, but they don't really get a ton of sacks. I don't think they create a lot of turnovers, because I look at them for DFS each week thinking Aaron Donald. And if you look, the defense really hasn't been that great.
And then I think the Tyrod thing hurts that as well. Now, DeVito wasn't turning the ball over, so probably either way, Tyrod or DeVito, you're dealing with guys who are unlikely to turn the ball over. But with Tyrod, it's also his whole career, he's been a guy who does not turn the ball over.
You're right.
He's also much more adept at avoiding sacks than DeVito would have been.
Yep.
So, yeah, to me, I would toss. There's always the chance because the Giants are obviously not a great offense, but I would toss that out. I would say if your gut's telling you Raiders, I'm fine with the Raiders, but I'm with you. I think the Jets are the play that makes the most sense.
All right, we agree there. My boy Sir 5, I've been around, buddy. We missed the show last week. We apologize.
Yeah.
You know, part of it was obviously Dum over there catching COVID, but
yeah, I had COVID and grading, so it was just a fantastic combo that was going on.
But you can always reach out to us on Twitter. We talk about it all the time. If you ever have any DFS questions, if for some reason you can't find our show or articles or whatever, just hit us up. We are like 99.9% likely to answer, because me and Joe, we ain't got a lot going on. The flex position. I do want to mention real quickly before I get into my two plays that Cedric Wilson now needs to be on high alert at 3,600. It looks like from reports, Waddle is not going to play this week. I think that Cedric Wilson is a smash play for cash. Like, if you're not doing the Taylor slate and stack, I definitely would have Wilson in my lineup. And again, between me and you, I'm going to have lineups with Wilson, Slayton, and Tyrod Taylor. And so that way I can have Kieran Williams, CMC, Nico Collins, McBride, etc. But my official play is Baltimore Ravens wide receiver. What a freaking stud this kid is. Zay Flowers, 5,600. He's also got an injury tag. It looks like he's going to play. Obviously check and make sure, but I didn't even realize this. He scored 20-plus points on DK in 3 of 4. Tied his season high against the 49ers with 9 catches and set a new season high in targets at 13. He scored a touchdown in 3 or 4 games. And I think what really makes me like this play, the Ravens lost Keaton Mitchell. They are not going to be able to lean on the run quite as much as they did for the stretch once Mitchell kind of emerged. And if you noticed early in the year before Mitchell got going, Zay Flowers was basically an extension of the run game, where they would throw these quick screens, slants, etc., just get him the ball really quickly within 3-4 yards of the line of scrimmage and let him make plays. And that's apparent by Mitchell being out last week, tied his season high in receptions, set a new season high in targets. And then Miami is actually really good versus the run. You look kind of across the board, they're a good run defense. Now, we'll see if that means they can stop Lamar. Who knows? But I do think that Baltimore is going to be forced to throw even more to consistently move it. Miami's 18th on DK versus wide receivers. And, I mean, again, Flowers has scored 20-plus points in 3 or 4, and he's 5,600 coming off a 13-target, 9-reception game. I think he's a really good value this week, and that's why he's my median flex.
I love that play. I will also be championing a stud rookie here.
Ooh.
Keep it going for Rashee Rice. He's still right underneath our limit here at 6,900 against the Bengals. Again, for all the talk about how bad these wide receivers are in Kansas City, one of them does not suck, and it is Rashee Rice. He has 5 straight weeks with double-digit points. Twice we've seen him break the 20-point mark, 24 and 27 in those 2 games. So, again, this is not a guy who's just giving you a reasonable floor, which if you're paying 6,900, you're going to want more. But, yeah, over those 5 games, at least 9 targets in every single game, at least 6 receptions in every single game, at least 60 yards in every single game, 3 touchdowns over those 5 games. Again, for me, it's simple. If you're telling me I get to have the number, granted, we can always say, Travis Kelce's the true number
He's
one,
not,
whatever.
though. I mean, Rice is seeing like
Yeah,
over
he might not
30%
be
targets
anymore.
per route run. He's not. Like the target rate, targets per route run, all actually lean to Rice for the last now 5-6 games.
Apologies to Mr. Taylor Swift, but it's clear that Travis Kelce has lost a half step.
Or he's hurt.
He's hurt. Granted, at this age, maybe those are just kind of the same thing.
Right. That's fair.
But yeah, is he still an elite tight end? Absolutely. I'm not trying to disparage him. But yeah, Rashee Rice is ascending. Travis Kelce is plateauing, if not kind of going back down a little bit. The Bengals, 6th most points to the position wide receiver over the last 8 weeks.
What did George Pickens just do?
Right. 4th most to the perimeter. So, yeah, you've got a Bengals defense that is struggling against wide receivers right now. You've got Rashee Rice racking up targets left and right. And again, like I said last week when I assumed this would be, or I guess 2 weeks ago because we didn't have the show last week. But, yeah, when I said this, I don't think this is when they played the Patriots, I said, I don't think this is a team that's going in to a shell when they get a lead and just be like, cool, we've got a lead. Because this offense just needs to try to get right consistently going into the playoffs. And against the Patriots, that worked out. They won that game by 10. They were never seriously challenged. Rashee Rice had 24 points.
Well, actually, though, that was a close game, though. Late.
It was reasonably close.
It kind of shows
Kansas City can't just put anyone fully away.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's basically Rice right now, Kelce or nothing. So, I mean, that even makes you feel even better about just his chances at this price.
Until he pops over that $7,000 mark, the way he's like Nico Collins.
Yep.
Where at least one of those Texans guys back when everybody was healthy.
Yeah, Dell. Yeah.
Every single week we were like, hey, Tank or Nico, we're throwing one in until these guys get over 7,000. Obviously, once one of them got hurt, it was like, well, you got to price the other guy over 7,000. So until Rashee gets over that 7,000 mark, which probably will be next week, he's going to be in my lineups.
All right, my value flex, he is a little expensive for, the risk, but I just believe in the stretch that they've had. And it's DeMarcus Robinson, 4,600 at the New York Giants, 13.6 points or more on DK in 4 straight. Obviously, if you do the math, it's almost exact on what he would need to hit the 3 times number. He scored a touchdown in every one of those games. More importantly, 24 targets in that span, 2 or more receptions in 6 straight, 15 receptions in his last 4, 16 points per game on DraftKings during this 4-game stretch, hit the 3 times his price number in 4 straight. I mean, everything you want to do. And I just look at it that, yes, there's obviously risk because he is without doubt the 4th, maybe 5th option in this offense. I think he's become the 4th over Higbee, but obviously you got Kieran Williams, Puka, and Kupp.
Right.
But I think that actually helps DeMarcus Robinson, and that's what we're seeing is this Rams offense has been so good when you have Kieran Williams, Kupp, Puka, and Stafford playing. And, they were always kind of disappointed that Tutu was not that guy that they kind of drafted and thought he would be. And DeMarcus Robinson has basically just jacked his role. And if you're an opposing defense, who are you going to worry about more? DeMarcus Robinson, Cooper Kupp, Puka, or Kieran Williams? And that's leaving him this real role to carve out. We both think Stafford's going to have a good day, obviously, versus the Giants. And I really think DeMarcus Robinson should actually be a little bit more expensive. I know he jumped up a good bit, but only 4,600 for a guy that, again, 24 targets his last 4 games. So that's 6 per, and the touchdown in 4 straight. I think that's going to continue happening because these defenses are so zoned in on the other guys, and Stafford will find him. Not to mention, Giants blitz a lot, right, Joe? That's going to, leave opportunities for big plays. And again, if you're blitzing, I'm pretty sure you're going to be more worried about Kupp and Puka than you are DeMarcus Robinson. It would not shock me off if he scores again. I still think he's a value. If he goes up again next week, then you got to discuss. But the fact that Aptwell was back last week and basically did not play, I don't even know if he logged a snap, and Robinson had, 6+ targets. It's his role now. He's the number 3 wide receiver for a really good offense right now and a great matchup.
Yeah, just to add to your point on a PFF's wide receiver corner matchups this week, Demarcus Robinson is listed as the 5th largest advantage for a wide receiver against his likely defensive opponents. So, here's the guys there's 5 other guys who are listed in the excellent range. They are Puka Nacua, Justin Jefferson, A.J. Brown, Nico Collins, and Chris Olave. So that's the company he's keeping, at least compared to the defenders that they're facing, which, again, with the Giants is not great. So, yeah, I think that's a fantastic play. I have 2 guys I want to run through real quick. Yeah. One is Noah Brown. He is questionable, but he was a limited participant today. Last 2 weeks, 18 targets without Stroud. One of those games is a 22-point game. Obviously, we saw back in weeks 9 and 10 when he was with Stroud and there were some injuries, which, again, Tank Dell is not coming back. He had the back-to-back 27-plus point games. So I think a lot of potential, especially against the Titans. Again, bad pass defense for FTN Fantasy, 31st in yards given up to number 2 wide receivers. So I think there's a lot of good to have with that matchup. And I'll throw in the other Giants guy, Jalen Hyatt, 3,200. The Rams have given up the 3rd most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 8 weeks, including 3rd most to the perimeter, which is where Hyatt and Slayton are going to be.
Double stack.
I mean, here's the thing. If you double stack, I guarantee
MME, not cash. I'm not that crazy, but I'm saying MME. Oh my God.
It's not insane.
11,200. No. 11,200 for those 3.
No, so I looked up the 2 games that Tyrod started, finished. So obviously there's a quarter and a half against the Jets that is unaccounted for. And last week, Hyatt had no targets in the second half. Slayton caught a 75-yard touchdown. So I do think Slayton is the safer play.
Oh, for sure.
But in the two complete games that Tyrod played, Slayton 5 receptions on 8 yards, or 5 receptions, 8 targets, 91 yards. Wan'Dale Robinson 9 receptions on 10 targets, 84 yards. Hyatt 5 receptions on 9 targets, 96 yards. So they're all between 8 and 10 targets. They're all between 84 to 96 yards. So Tyrod is spreading the ball around. But the most important thing for me for Hyatt, well, 2 actually. The one is the Tyrod factor, which is he's had 4 games all season where he's seen 4 more targets. 2 of those games are the 2 games that Tyrod started.
Wow.
So again, Tyrod is the guy who is opening up the deep ball in this offense. Huge win for Slayton. And even more so Hyatt, because that's kind of 90% of his game at this point. The other thing is he has been horrific against man defenses. Under a half yard per route run this season. I think it's closer to like 1/3. So he's doing nothing against man defense. Rams bottom 5 in running man defense. So it's a ton of zone. That feeds into Hyatt as well. So yeah. And then listen, like I said, Waller, Wan'Dale, you can throw in whoever you want, but the 2 guys I like the most are the 2 we've said, because Slayton and Hyatt could catch a 75-yard touchdown and you're good. You've more than paid for it, and it could be one play. And if we get lucky, like, a couple of years ago, I got lucky with the Washington Titans game. You can get a guy who catches 2 or 3 deep balls.
What's up, Dyami Brown?
Now you're cashing in because, Hyatt and Slayton could absolutely have a Dyami Brown game here. So, pick one, roll the dice, and see what happens. Or pick, like you said, if you want to really roll the dice in a big tournament, pick both.
Oh, MME, I can promise you there'll be at least one, buddy. It's got me thinking about it. All right, real quickly, defenses, then we'll get out of here. You know the rules. If you've watched this before, we can go ahead and go down to 3,000. Look below because we're not spending on anybody more than that. I like the 3,000, 2,900 and the Chargers and the Broncos, but I mean, for starters, with the Ravens there at 2,800, it's the same thing I did. And having a really good, day Monday in the Monday slate, the Ravens were 2,500. I'm like, I know the Niners offense is really good, but are you kidding me? This is arguably the best defense in the league. I double that again this week versus Miami, again without Waddle. But honestly, I'm going to go even further down. I really like both Carolina and Cincinnati at 27 and 2,600. Jacksonville is a mess right now offensively, and banged up at a unbelievable rate. Carolina's D's been pretty good the last few weeks. And then again, we've talked about the Bengals have really had some great defensive plans for the Kansas City Chiefs when Mahomes and them have been cooking and being the Mahomes and Chiefs that we're used to seeing. This is not the Mahomes and Chiefs we're used to seeing. So that's the two I'm circling. And again, if I have 2,800 between the 2,900 between the three, obviously, or 2,800, I was right. I would take the Ravens, but I usually try to spend every dollar I can. So I'm probably going to need that 2,600 or 2,700.
I'm generally of the same mind with the Ravens just because I think that's one of the best coach teams. I mean, if you look at like teams that vary their coverage just to max confusion, they're right at the top, first or second in those metrics. So
they've scored 6 points or more, Joe, since week 2.
The only thing that gives me a slight pause, because I still like it, especially with Waddle out, is the perfect scenario for Mike McDaniel facing this defense is for that defense to have just played the San Francisco 49ers. Because obviously McDaniel came from San Francisco. He's running a bunch of the Shanahan concepts.
So now he got a test run.
Right. He got a free test run to see what happens. And obviously it did not go super well. Although it's not like San Francisco didn't move the ball, at least in the first half, they moved the ball reasonably well. They just turned the ball over. Now, Tua's had his games where he's been awesome, and he's had his games where he turns the ball over. And when they played the Giants, they're averaging like 10 yards a play, but he committed like a couple turnovers, and the Giants were able to semi-stay in it for a little while. So there's always a chance that happens. So I'm not against that play, but that is the one thing I want to throw out there to give me a little pause. I'm with you, Panthers and Bengals. I think those make a lot of sense. And then the one even cheaper team I'll throw out there is the Patriots against the Bills, because Bill Belichick remains as smart of a defensive mind as there is in the NFL for whatever his limitations are as a general manager. The Patriots have scored at least 5 points in every game since week 7. That includes 5 against Buffalo, 5 against Miami, 7 against Kansas City. So they've played the top quarterbacks, top offenses. They're still giving you positive points. 2 turnovers against Mahomes, 5 sacks against Denver last week. Obviously, listen, I'd rather play Panthers, Bengals, Ravens, because I think I'm a little bit scared, but that if Josh Allen doesn't have a turnover game, they just score 30 points and you end up with nothing. But
because I think the last 2 times Allen's played the Pats in Buffalo, hadn't he just freaking boat raced them?
I mean, I definitely remember that playoff game a couple of years ago where it was like literally the perfect game where they just scored touchdowns every possession. So yeah, that would be the risk there. So that's why I would rather go. Lou Anarumo has a history of giving Kansas City problems when the offense is in better shape than it is now. Ejiro Evero is a good defensive coordinator. The Panthers defense is not trash like the rest of the team. And the Jags are another offense that's been in a lot of flux recently. Christian Kirk is out, who was the most consistent wide receiver. And then, the Ravens are either defense 1A or 1B with the Ravens or with the Browns. So you can always feel good there. But if you really need that extra cash, give me the Patriots. Whatever you do, don't play the Commanders. It's not worth it. Find the money, because keep in mind, this is a defense that has given negative points in 2 of their last 4 games. That was against Miami and Dallas. San Francisco's an even better offense than Miami and Dallas. So find the 300 to get to the Patriots. Do not play the Commanders.
And I really do apologize, Wizzy Jefferson, because I just noticed Browns went right down and scored 7. He's probably dog cussing us at this moment, but I still
Joe Flacco's unstoppable.
I still stand by. It's early, but Flacco, by the way, 3 or 4, 71 yards and a touchdown on that first drive. And again, if you have David Njoku in season longs, 2 catches, 64 yards, this is reaching like an unreal level.
I just love that someone was like fuck it, like some Browns fan who was in their their playoffs for fantasy was like, you know what, 3 weeks ago they're like, I'm riding Flacco, and then he's just like guiding them to the title.
I mean, I told several people that reached out to me about, would you start Flacco last week? And I was like, unless you have like a top 8 QB, yeah, I probably would. It's crazy. But all right, so that gets us through our favorite play, 6,900 and below. Be sure to check out all the amazing work at fantasy6pack.net. Our boys, Dave and Chris, who big congrats to them, both lifelong Detroit Lions fans, winning the first division in 30 years. They were very excited, and rightfully so, on Sunday. So big props to them. But they'll have their show tomorrow. And then obviously we have the Sunday morning show on Fantasy Six Pack that gets you ready to fill out all your questions. If your fantasy football seasons are coming to an end, that sucks. But that's the great part about DFS. We'll be going all the way to Super Bowl. We're degenerates.
You and I need it this year. Our teams are bad. As I believe both of our all of our season long teams are out. So it's we're all in. We're all in the DFS.
And I think there is a real opportunity to win money once we get to these smaller slates, like I did on Monday. If it's not as many variables. So, but for Keith and Joe, this is a DFS Kickoff Show, and good luck, Joe Matz, to your Arizona Wildcats tonight in their bowl game versus them stupid Sooners. We'll see you guys.